What is actually changing? Well, the first change in the tip is construction could be accelerated. So originally it was programmed for 2025, but after all the rebalancing of funding up in Tallahassee, District 7 was able to secure a faster construction start date. So part of the changes here is moving construction programming from fiscal year 25 up to 24. Additionally, $9 million more was needed is envisioned to need to complete construction. And there hasn't been any scope changes for that $9 million. When I talked with the project manager at District 7, what he says, it's just really those big price increases that we're seeing industry-wide across the construction and infrastructure industry. And this is a big project, it's a big interstate project. So this amount is needed to be able to get this project through construction. So a little bit about the timeline. DOT would like to let the contract sometime this summer, get construction started sometime this fall, and then have construction completed and be open to traffic by 2028. And as always, your TPO staff ensured that all of our public participation requirements were met. We posted a newsletter article, social media, did an individual web page 3 weeks before the TPO board meeting. I haven't seen any public comments on any of those, although there was a relatively positive, or not relatively, there was a positive article through ABC Action News quoting some local citizens saying that this project is very much needed. So that's kind of the pulse on that. So the action before you today is to consider approving this amendment from I-75 from Tampa Bypass Canal to Fowler, this TIP amendment for the fiscal year 24 to 28 TIP, and then recommend approval to the TPO board. And I'm happy to take any questions or take your feedback on this amendment.
Okay, thank you, Elizabeth. Do you have any comments about?
I'd like to concur with the ABC Action News. This is a major congestion problem both in the morning and afternoon. This is a much needed project, economic health of our county. Okay,
Any other comments? Yes.
Thank you. Elizabeth, does this have any impact at all on the trail alignment for the bypass canal?
I don't believe so. Wade, I don't know if you know more about the bypass canal, but in my discussions with the project manager, it sounds like it's all within the right of way and just focusing on this and not impacting any other projects.
Just the bridge replacement was the only thing I was wondering about.
Since they're existing bridges, you would have to go under them or over them anyway. So it could impact it. It would be a longer under or a longer over, but not significantly, and not the ability to do it or not do it. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, hi, Elizabeth. This is Jeff. But for the record, I got here a little late. Apologize for that. This is Jeff Sims, current chair. Sorry, you probably covered it, but I recall we had one of the presentations about emergency exodus during a catastrophic event or so forth, like hurricanes. Maybe you covered this. If you could just speak to that. I recall there being the potential for a bottleneck at the bridge over the canal. So is that addressed by the?
That's a great point, Jeff, that I didn't explicitly address. But when you look at the purpose and need of this project, emergency evacuations, freight, just general capacity improvements, this is all very much necessary. This project facilitates that safe movement of people and goods, and especially in vulnerable times. So that was one of the impetuses to identify this project and get it delivered.
Okay, so would you like to address this also? Please,
yes, if I could,
please state your name.
DOT staff, specifically to address the emergency egress and stuff like that for evacuations and whatnot. This will expand the shoulder, as well as obviously add an additional auxiliary lane. As everybody who's ever driven that particular part of I-75 would know, I get to do it every morning and every evening. With the new auxiliary lanes to the south of it, it merges and bottlenecks right there until you get to Fowler, and it opens back up a little bit. So this would obviously allow for our emergency shoulder use, which would be technically on the left side, which you have all the signage up for and all that fun stuff. So I get to play one of the incident commanders during disaster. So I get to actually be the one that implement that plan sometimes. So if you have any questions about that particular side of it or any of the ESU stuff we have going on there, but that would most definitely help us with that evacuation plans and whatnot. And I mean, other than what everything Elizabeth had to say, I don't think there's anything else necessarily to comment on from the department. If you guys have any particular questions, I'm happy to answer them. The main reason, obviously, this is before you. This was already a project that was in the tip. It exceeded, because of that additional increase, the 20% little alert indicator there, which makes you guys have to approve it at the MPO board. So that's why it's back here. So if you guys have any questions about them.
Very good. Appreciate it. Appreciate it. Any other questions or comments? Anyone online? I would just echo what Bob said. I don't travel it all the time, but our office is near there and there's definitely a congestion issue there. So I'm certainly encouraged with the idea that it's getting updated. So with that, we have a motion for approval of the I-75, provide the Tampa bypass canal and Fowler tip amendment to the FY 24-28 tip and recommend approval to the TPO board. Can I have a motion?
I'll make the motion to approve.
Motion to approve. Do we have a second?
Jonathan Scott, second.
Thank you, Jonathan. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Elizabeth. Yes, sir. Okay. Next up is the 2050 plan needs assessment for freights and goods. Warren Brooks.
Here's, yeah, she's online.
And she should have it up. Lauren or Larissa, can you hear us? Check.
It's changed from Lauren. Lauren's muted.
Hi, everyone.
Is Lauren?
Hi, Lauren.
We could hear you. Now we can hear you.
She's muted.
Nope, can't hear you now. Hold on.
And I will acknowledge that we are switching over to Teams from our previous go-to webinar application for these meetings, which changes a few things. One thing that we're also including while we get set up in our invitations to this is an RSVP button on the calendar invitation or whatever we send out the invitations with. But if you just click on that you're going, it will send us a response that you're going, and we won't bother you and try to keep track of it that way.
Can
And it looks like,
everyone? Oh, sorry.
yes, you
Can you
look
hear
ready. Yes.
Okay. Okay. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for your patience. Yes, we're kind of working through the logistics. So I'm Lauren Brooks. I'm with AECOM. I served as the consultant project manager for this effort. I'm joined by Larissa Krinos, my colleague, who was part of the brains of the operation, if you will. So I brought her along to help answer some of the tough technical questions. Anyway, we have a lot of material to cover, so I'll try to be as concise as possible. We'll go over kind of the objectives of the two efforts, how we set everything up, of course, findings and our approach, and then we'll get into the two pieces that pertain specifically to the long-range transportation plan. So as I mentioned, we tackled 2 efforts at once, and I know freight and truck routes aren't the sexiest of topics, but they're very important. They're essential to the economic vitality of the Hillsborough County economy, as well as the regional economy. Freight move or goods movement is kind of the system, if you will. It's the shipment, circulation, distribution of the goods. The truck routes are considered the arteries of that distribution system. So truck routes are important in the sense that we designate them to preserve our personal mobility. We're telling trucks where to go, designating those specific roads. So as I mentioned, we did 2 efforts as part of one assignment. So the first part was to look at the Hillsborough County Truck Route Plan and update it. It was prepared back in 2014. So of course, a lot has changed since then. Really focusing on the deficiencies of the network, if other routes could potentially be added, all in the name of course, managing the flow of trucks throughout the county. So then the other part was to look again at other routes of Hillsborough County that could potentially be added to the Hillsborough County network, how they function and support the truck route. So if there are needs or deficiencies of that network, address those so we can make sure the truck routes are performing the way they need to be performing. And then, of course, looking at the projects and how they apply to the system. And of course, we did all of this through the lens of preserving personal mobility, neighborhood context, safety, and of course, quality of life goals. So in order to really hone in and achieve the results that we were seeking, we decided to split up the entire county roadway network into 3 networks, if you will. So we separated out just the Hillsborough County truck routes. We then looked at all roads that were either owned or maintained by Hillsborough County. And then we looked at everything else that was owned or maintained by the various municipalities or Florida Department of Transportation or the Tampa Hillsborough Expressway Authority. And of course, all these roads were not part of the truck route system. One other thing that we did, again, to really focus in on our results was to exclude limited access facilities. So the 3 interstates, the Veterans Expressway, and then the I-4 connector, we removed from our analysis so as not to skew the results. And again, these are kind of, or those facilities are considered, principal arterials. We want them to move the freight in our area. So we consider them as part of our preserve system. Sorry. Another point that we wanted to make when we first set up or approached this assignment was to come up with a common definition of the word truck, because truck means a lot of things to different folks. So we used the Federal Highway Administration 13 vehicle category classification. And we said that anything that was class 6 or above, or that had 2 or more axles, was considered a truck. All right, so I'll get into the analysis and findings. We had 4 major inputs as part of our framework for this effort. We interviewed both public and private freight stakeholders to get an operator's standpoint in terms of how freight moves within the county, or if there's any hindrances to truck movements. We also established a MetroQuest survey to get the input from residents. So how do trucks affect them on a daily basis? What is the greatest impact in terms of truck routing? We asked them to provide locations of those issues, and then of course, how the TPO could potentially invest in solutions to mitigate those issues. We also looked at, so Hillsborough County collects comments or complaints from citizens. They collect it through a database, which is, we've been calling it the report a concern or report an issue database. So we looked at those complaints over 2 years, 2021 and 2023, and separated out those comments that were specific to truck-related issues. So we complemented that with the input from the survey. We also attended various neighborhood group meetings and piggybacked on those meetings that the Planning Commission held when they were conducting their update to the comprehensive plan. So the last input was, of course, data sets. We reviewed an extensive number of data sets. These are a few of the representative data sets that we went over. And this was a large part of our analysis, getting these databases or data sets to link up and join nicely so we could then do some comparisons. So with our extensive list of data sets, we decided to organize them into 2 different categories: existing freight network factors and freight related performance factors. And I'll show you an example in a minute. And then we also established evaluation criteria. And really the evaluation criteria were just different ways that we combined the factors and applied them to the different networks. So we took the data set categorization a step further in that we also separated them into freight attractors. So what are those elements or aspects that are more conducive for freight activity or that facilitate freight activity, truck movement? And then what are those elements that are kind of unfavorable to truck activity or freight movement? So here are the 3 sets of evaluation criteria. Again, they really just served as a combination of those factors, and then we applied them to the different sub-networks, if you will. So the truck route evaluation criteria obviously pertains specifically to the truck routes. We really wanted to focus on those routes that were underperforming. We then also looked at, as I mentioned, the other 2 networks, and then how well those roads of the other 2 sub-networks supported the truck routes, or maybe served better. It served in a more efficient way in terms of supporting truck and freight movement. The project impact evaluation criteria I'll get into a little bit later, but these this criteria set was applied to the project specifically. So here's kind of a snapshot of our initial analysis in terms of identifying those routes that were either low performing or that could potentially be added to the network. So I'll orient you quickly. The red are those existing Hillsborough County truck routes, as well as those routes that are preserved. And I say those routes that are preserved in the sense that I-4 connector was actually built after the Hillsborough County truck route plan was established. But obviously that is a major freight facility, and it should be part of the truck route network. The purple are those Hillsborough County owned or maintained roads that kind of bubble to the top in terms of having high truck volumes, or we're in an area with lots of freight activity. Those in green were the ones that surfaced to the top in terms of other roads that were owned or maintained by the Florida Department of Transportation or the cities. The dashed lines are those Hillsborough County truck routes that surfaced as low performing. So low performing in the sense that they had lower truck volumes than expected, or were within an area that maybe had less freight activity than expected. So going back to the freight attractors and detractors, so when we applied our factors and evaluation criteria, we decided to do an unweighted numerical score. Again, we wanted to approach this in a quantitative way and in an objective way. So we came up at the end with kind of a overall scores. And so for freight attractors, the higher the score, that meant the better or more conducive that specific road or route was to serving freight or trucks. Then the lower the score, the more unfavorable the conditions were. And then, of course, the converse is true for the detractors, where the higher the score meant more unfavorable conditions associated with that road, and then the lower the score, the more conducive. So here's, I'll quickly review our findings. So for the lower performing routes, a lot of them were within areas that had few freight detractors. So again, limited aspects that are unfavorable to freight. So I guess that's the good news. They're where they should be. Two roads did surface to the top in the sense that we might want to revisit them, and in that they were low performing, but they also had sensitive features and a good number of comments either associated with them specifically or within the area. But those were County Road 672 and Sims Road. Two other roads that were also part of the low performing routes were the lower portion of Dale Mabry Highway and then Interbay Boulevard. However, we feel that these two roads, they serve critical access to MacDill Air Force Base as well as a fuel terminal off of Interbay Boulevard, so they should be retained as part of the truck route system. We then also noticed that downtown Tampa has pretty much every road in downtown Tampa is a designated truck route. So maybe there's opportunity to, be more strategic and just focus on those roads where we really want trucks within downtown Tampa. So as far as the county roads, those roads that were owned and maintained by Hillsborough County, again, when the Hillsborough County truck route was first prepared, there were several facilities that had not been built yet, such as a lot of the West Shore interchange ramps leading to the airport. So obviously we feel strongly that those should be added to the network along with George Bean Parkway. Air Cargo Road was one that surfaced in the sense that it parallels West Shore Boulevard in Drew Park, and it's Air Cargo Road is actually a complete north-south corridor, whereas West Shore Boulevard in that area, there's a gap. So it's not a complete north-south facility. So maybe there's opportunity to designate Air Cargo Road instead. There are also areas within the county where there's truck routes that are 1 or more miles apart. So it's causing trucks to, cut through various neighborhoods. So there's opportunity, I think, to explore and maybe expand the truck route network within the Plant City area, Northwest County, and South County. Just reiterating that, again, some roads were not built or ramps were not built when the truck route plan was first prepared. So again, adding the I-4 connector, some of the interstate ramps that connect to downtown Tampa, some of the frontage roads and the I-75 rest area, those should all be added to the truck route network. There are some differences in routes that were designated by FDOT as part of their Tampa Bay Regional Strategic Freight Plan, and some that were designated by the city of Tampa as truck routes. So, I think there's probably opportunity to reconcile some of these designation differences. And I mentioned before, Plant City, that's an area of opportunity to maybe see if we can expand the truck route network there. But then also, of course, providing important, redundant, and additional access to our major freight hubs. So the various airports within our area, Port Tampa Bay, and then, of course, the CSX rail yard. So getting into the project's costs and investment levels that pertain specifically to the long-range transportation plan. So we first approached this by reviewing all the plans that there are out there. So such as the Hillsborough TPO Long Range Transportation Plan, of course, the Hillsborough TPO Transportation Improvement Program, the FDOT Work Program, the FDOT Strategic Intermodal System Cost Feasible Plans. So we compiled a long list of projects, cleaned those up. Where there were costs associated with this projects, we took those and brought them into 2023 present day dollars. Where costs were not identified, we reviewed similar projects within the District 7 area and Hillsborough County and came up with a reasonable planning level cost. We then broke those into 3 different tiers. So the baseline investment level are all those projects that are funded within the first 5 years. So everything that's in the current Transportation Improvement Program, the FDOT Work Program, the Hillsborough County Capital Improvement Program, those were part of our baseline investment level. Then all projects that were primarily under $200,000, but that could be completed by 2035, those were in our tier 1 level. There were a few that were higher than 200,000, but because they could be completed within the 2035 timeframe, they were associated with the tier 1 level. So those types of projects included signage, signal timing, intersection reconfiguration, and then new traffic signals. So that's just kind of an example of the projects within tier 1. And then tier 2 were all those, major investments. So any project that exceeded 2 million and that had a longer time horizon in terms of completion. So that would likely, or it was anticipated to be completed between 2036 and 2050. And the projects that were associated specifically with tier 2 pertain to the I-275 widening and interchange improvements, as well as the Gandy Bridge replacement. I do want to note, though, that we did remove all major capacity, so major widenings or new interchanges from our project list, because those are part of the major projects needs assessment. So I know Wade will at some point, I think, talk to you all about that. So as I mentioned before, at the very beginning of the presentation, we had project impact evaluation criteria. So really we use the criteria to evaluate the effectiveness of each project. So these were some of the factors that we looked at. So we looked at data, and then of course we kind of answered the questions of, could this project potentially improve safety or reduce truck-related crashes? And then could the project reduce delay? So we came up with overall scores, which we dubbed as our project impact on truck operation score. I know it's kind of a mouthful, but then of course, to simplify everything, we associated these scores with low to high rankings. So 1 was low, 2 was moderate, 3 was high. We did the same thing for project costs. So we divided the various project costs into ranges and did the same thing of, low, moderate, high in terms of cost or price. And this enabled us to then do kind of a comparison of, what is the biggest bang for the buck? Like, how cost effective is this particular project? So anything that rated 1.5 or higher, any investment that scored 1.5 or higher was considered a high cost effective project, meaning we'll get the biggest bang for our buck. Anything that scored a 1 was considered moderately cost effective. And then anything that scored below 1, so the red, was considered least cost effective. So we're here today to recommend that the TPO board receive the LRTP needs assessment for freight and goods movement and the Hillsborough County truck route plan update. And with that, I'll take questions.
Okay, great. Thank you, Lauren. Do we have any questions from the committee? Bob?
Yes, you specifically called out one county route County Route 672 as sensitive features. County Route 672 serves the South County landfill, also serves the strawberry fields and some mineral extraction industries down there for historically. Why does it changed to call it context sensitive?
It may have been due to the non-discrimination plan areas that were designated by the Hillsborough TPO. So we can look into that, Bob, and see why it was kind of surfacing to the top.
Please explain what you just said. What is the
Sorry.
TPO?
The TPO.
Sorry.
I'm happy to address that.
Sure.
The TPO non-discrimination plan, which is adopted by both the TPO board and the planning commission, I believe, as well. There are several areas that we look at as part of that that have been identified as having larger components of either racial or ethnic minorities, limited English proficiency populations, persons with disabilities. I believe we've included high percentages of young people and old people, and zero vehicle households, as well as possibly other features that we just give extra consideration to and try to flag those areas during projects if there are issues.
Okay, I might need help from Mike Williams here. Most of the development along these roads on the east of 301. Most of those are recently developed subdivision in the last 10 years with an addition of a high school there. Are those the sensitive issues? Not. The landfill has been there a long time, and the mineral industry has been there a long time. And these housing developments are relatively new, and the high school is relatively new. Is that the context sensitivity you're talking about here?
Well, it would be more related to the actual populations within those areas, at least from the non-discrimination plan. Schools would certainly be something about that, probably not the landfill. And I'm not 100% sure that all of the development in that area in particular would have been captured in the years that we were looking at data for those, which I believe would be the 2020 census. But I'm not sure that all of that was online. All of that development was online 3 years ago. So it could have changed a little bit since then.
Yes, thanks, Wade. Exactly. Like, Bob, you mentioned the school. That was one of the factors we looked at as a sensitive feature. So, but we can, like I said, we can certainly take a closer look and report back to you.
I have an additional question. In your definition of freight, I guess you're also included agricultural industries. All the agriculture in that part of the county, as well as the county landfill, are freight. Is that correct? Was included in your modeling?
So we mainly looked at the rail yards. I'm sorry, I'm trying to think of what else. The freight activity centers that were actually designated as part of the Tampa Bay Regional Strategic Freight Plan. So I think, yes, how they define freight activity, I think that also included some of the uses you just mentioned. So, but we primarily looked at those data sets existing in future freight activity hubs that they had defined. And then, like I said, the CSX rail yards, the airport and port facilities. I don't know if Larissa has access to unmute, but she might be able to provide a little bit more insight.
I want to follow up. What's the space between the truck routes here? It looks like it takes 672 out. That whole part of the county is missing a truck route. 674.
That is one area that is noted as there being more than a mile in between truck routes in both the southeast portion of the county and the northwest.
So removal of this would create a large gap in the economic disincentive to the trucking industry in that part of the county.
It would certainly need further study, and I would think it would put them a lot further apart. As part of the approval or the acceptance of the report we're requesting, that would be for further study. The only ones that we as staff would be requesting to add in right now are the I-4 connector, which was built after the 2014 plan. The West Shore limited access ramps that have been reconfigured and were not part of the 2014 plan. And I believe that's it. The rest would need further study. And Lauren, please excuse me if I'm leaving anything out in this speaking.
No, you pretty much captured it. Yep, everything. Again, Bob, I know we want to work with you and Mike too, because truck routes are controversial. They need to be vetted with more extensive community input. So we did not recommend anything specifically except for, again, the I-4 connector, some of those major facilities that are considered that should be considered part of the preserved network, if you will.
Lauren, is this, when you say 672, is this the Baum Road portion of it? Because Big Bend Road is technically 672 as well.
It is Ball, Riverview, and then Ball. Yeah.
So it doesn't include
Yeah.
the Big Bend,
It's so. How about you?
because it charges up in Big Bend is 672. Okay, thank you. I view Big Bend a lot different than, or at least between Portland and Trade.
Yeah.
A lot different than the Baum piece further south.
Agreed.
Right.
Right. Is that portion of it different? Because that's 672, whereas this
Portion Big Bend, right, it stops at 301, and this is 672.
Right, this is all 672 running here, but I was talking about the low performing, because isn't that what that's talking about with the comment of the low performing road being Sims and 672?
It is
Correct.
the portion just, yes, you're correct. Just east of 301. It's the low.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to understand, because if this is 301, because that's Baum Mama. Right, that's Baum Mama going up to 672.
Yes.
We can, again, we can take a closer look. We used the Hillsborough County Centerline file. So we, however it was defined there, that's what we used. And again, we used replica data, which replica data gave us origin destination information. So we just looked at 2021 replica data, because using the 2045 future traffic data, the replica data was actually higher than the 2045 volumes. So we decided to just use the replica data, not distinguishing between existing and future. So again, the replica data is great, but it's not always accurate, and we didn't have enough effort to validate the whole system and everything. So we used it as is. We did do some cleanup, of course, to make sure we could marry it with our truck route network. But again, this was all quantitative. So if there are places that are not making sense, then let's take a deeper look, and we can certainly fix it.
And to pick up on what Bob said, the majority of the packing plants have, of course, left Hillsborough County, and a lot of our ag is on the eastern portion of the county, leaves the county for packing. But Bob's point, I was wondering, has this or will this, or is there anything that goes to the AEDC, Agricultural Economic Development Commission of Hillsborough County?
I'm not aware of plans to take it to them.
Even if it was something just for comment.
I'd be happy to send it to them from comment. They were not a stakeholder that we consulted during this process.
Okay, thank you. Sarah.
Yes, thank you. I think this is really thorough. One thing that when I was kind of looking at it was throwing me off a little is the Hillsborough County truck route plan update part of it, because it seems like, with the exception of the facilities that we mentioned, we're not making or recommending a lot of changes to the truck route plan update itself. It's more of setting up the context for updating the map. So I was wondering if maybe we should consider some nuances, that this is setting up some questions that we have to follow up on still before we actually have the updated truck route plan, like the roadways to take off, like with what we just discussed or some of these other things. So I was wondering if maybe we want to say this is like the background materials or kind of preparations for updating the truck route, but it still needs, it sounds like a couple of next steps before we have it packaged for the commission.
I think that's a great point and a very good way to say it. The acceptance by the TPO board is only because this is a TPO product. It will need to go to the Board of County Commissioners with an updated ordinance, and just a little background on that, the Sheriff's Department has deemed this unenforceable, or the current ordinance unenforceable.
Yep.
And so that is the hurry, if you will, to get something additional on the books, at least for the existing truck routes. And then, as you say, follow up with some of those additional roadways for further study to see if there are roadways that we would like to add and take off. But this is meant to be a minimal update for the existing truck routes so that we can get something enforceable on the books and work with the county attorney to do so on a new ordinance. But that would be, for it to be adopted by the board, it will go separately to the Board of County Commissioners with an ordinance attached.
Perfect. I think just maybe adding that clarity when this gets presented to them, that this is being accepted by the TPO board because of kind of how it happened, and that additional steps will happen before it goes to the VOCC. And then we can work as staff to get that figured out.
I think that's a really good point, and we'll clarify it for the additional committees and the board as we go forward. So thank you. Yes.
Yeah, thank you. Great comment.
Can you share with us why it's not enforced by the Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office?
I don't fully understand why, and I've heard multiple different interpretations of why it's not enforceable, so I really can't answer that.
The reason I asked the question is that's one of the most common customer service issues we get in Hillsborough County.
Mhm.
And we defer, a lot of this has to do with law enforcement. And we would like to address the issue for quality of life of our citizens, but it's an issue. And it's repetitive every day with comments on this particular issue.
I very much understand that, and I have heard more comments as part of this update and project than almost any other project I've ever had. More calls, more emails. It's a very sensitive topic for people, and people are impacted in their neighborhoods by truck traffic. And we also all have a great need to have goods and services delivered to our places of business or homes or wherever. So with that being said, what I do know from talking to the sheriff is that there are issues related to the definition of a truck that are problematic. So we will be working with them and on the ordinance with that. But there are also issues related to where can they go off a truck? Where can they deviate from a truck route, and what distance and how far out of the way can they deviate? Really, it should just be to a destination or a pickup point, but there's a lot of shortcutting going on that's obvious in various parts of the county. So trying to get something enforceable on the books as quickly as possible is, and we will be, we do have a meeting coming up with the Sheriff's Department and the county attorney to lay out that process.
Okay, sound like it kind of struck a nerve here with this one. So I can say we, at EPC, we field a lot of complaints about a lot of things, and truck traffic is another one of those ones. And I certainly, we don't address it. We don't deal with noise and vibrations, but I've heard the complaints, and I wholeheartedly agree that we need to have something enforceable in place going forward to try and have teach specifically for residential. It's difficult. I witness what they see, and I would be protected. So in that regard, that's just a little side comment from myself and the agency, but we certainly would endorse that being addressed going forward. Any other comments on Lauren's presentation? Covered quite a bit of ground. Okay, so there is a requested action on this to recommend that the TPO board receive the needs assessment. Can I have such a motion?
I have a clarification.
Yes.
Sarah made a offer here. Does motion include the agreement with what she recommended here?
That would be up to.
I'm sorry, did I include what?
What's Sarah Capers suggestions.
That we follow up on those additional recommended routes or?
The staff.
Oh, yes, that we will include that in the presentation to additional committees. Yes, absolutely. That would.
Okay, based upon what Wade just said.
Okay, I mean, I was gonna say we can formally add it with the motion that goes to us if you want, but if you, so if we're comfortable, it's gonna be addressed based on the discussion.
I promise we'll put that slide.
We have a promise with Wade, so all we need is a handshake.
Yeah.
Okay, so,
Second by Jay Collins with Bob.
okay, so Bob Campbell, you make the motion,
Yes.
and second for Jay, do we have any discussion or opinion? All right, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you very much.
Thank you all.
Thank you, Laura. All right, next up is election of officer.
Yeah, it's something interesting. All right. Sorry. Okay. Our current officers, of course, are our chair, Jeff Simmons, our vice chair, Mike Williams, and our officer at large, Jay Collins. We have, as far as the attendance, we did have a few absences at the beginning of the year from Hillsborough County, but that was more or less a representation issue. The only other one is Port Tampa Bay, although none of those are not for consecutive ones. So we're in pretty good shape as far as attendance with the committee goes. I don't think there's anybody we would need to remove or consider removing as part of this update. Although you all are willing to make your own judgments on that. I think we've maintained, with the exception of December, a quorum every month. So that's pretty good. That being said, we can do the election of officers individually or all at once. And we would need nominations either for our current officers to continue or to nominate anyone else to move forward.
All right, very good. So do we have any nominations for? I guess it's more of a discussion. Does anybody have anybody, what would they specifically be interested on these positions? Or with that, I could nominate something to act in one of the positions or to keep everything the same.
I would nominate the current three to stay.
Are you both good with maintaining your position?
Sure.
So, I mean, again, I'm going to keep it open so anybody can have their opinion and wants to express it, but thank you.
Are there any other nominations either from in the room or from online? And if you cannot be heard online, feel free to raise your hand and we will acknowledge. Seeing and hearing none, I guess Mr. Collins, yeah.
I just wanted to ask, folks online, do they get to vote for this, or is that they don't get to vote and they don't vote? And then it's in our bylaws that this happens in January, right? Okay. I was just looking, it looks like overall attendance is pretty steady, but I was wondering about that, if there's ever a month that this would be more likely to have more membership show up.
That's a good question.
But it doesn't look like, it looks like it would be one or two people. It's not like you're not going to go to 16 or 17. So, yeah, that's all.
Well, if there are no additional nominations, is there a second to Jesus' nomination?
I'll second it. Let's line her.
All right. Mr. Chair, unless you have anything else, I guess.
I guess so. I'm reading through the things here. But it says it's supposed to be voted individually, but I think we're okay to say based on what was stated, all the stated, that's what motion say. The motion is to retain the same, positions as currently in place for the officers. Any discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So be it.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
And I believe we have Ms. Corcoran here.
So we take
Let
them,
me, excuse me, let me get out of this stuff.
should I be sharing the presentation from over here or do you have it? So I have it on L podium. I wasn't sure.
Oh, you need to bring it in. Let me.
I can also go back to my desk and just say hello, if that's easier.
We can go back to your desk and I'll pull up that ultra out of this paper.
Yeah, I could come back in for questions or just.
Thank you.
When good technology goes back.
See, you gotta say that. Okay, I don't know who would get this, but what you just witnessed was Katrina and the wave. All right, how many people get that one?
Yes, sir.
An old super hit from the 80s, Walking on Sunshine. It was by Katrina and the wave. Well, I think that wasn't good. Yeah, I keep showing you where my wheelhouse was.
You've got range.
I do. It's old.
Hi, can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, I will go ahead and share my screen. All right. So my name is Katrina Corcoran, Planning Commission staff. I'm here today to present the draft 2024 to 2029 strategic plan. This is not an action item. We're just seeking feedback. So it's for your information only. If you have any questions or comments on this, we'd be happy to take them. So some background on the current strategic plan. As you can see here, we have our 2018 to 2023 Plan Hillsborough Strategic Plan. We had 7 areas of focus that are shown here on the slide. And this has overseen a number of accomplishments over the last several years, but as we're entering 2024, it's reached the end of its time horizon and it's time to update the strategic plan for the next 5 years. So real quick, wanted to give you an overview of some of the mandated items, the things that we have to do as on behalf of the Planning Commission, the TPO, and the River Board. So a lot of these things are things that happen regardless of what's in our strategic plan. Our strategic plan may speak to some of these items, but these things happen, again, whether or not they're in the strategic plan. So I'm here today to talk to you about the update of the strategic plan. We have a draft that's available, defines the priorities of the agency for the next 5 years. It's internally focused and it's a non-regulatory document. So it's non-binding. It doesn't require us to do anything. It just guides our agency over the next 5 years. It does ensure that we have high quality work on behalf of all 3 boards. It takes into consideration staff input, the board's input, and really gives us those near-term priorities when we do a lot of long-range planning, making sure that we have things to focus on in the near term as well. So this gives you an overview of the project timeline. You can see that we've been doing a number of touch points with staff and with our boards. over the last several months. So we did touch points with our staff with an all staff survey. We also touched points with the board in terms of surveys, interviews, and a board retreat. So from all of that, we took all of that feedback that we received and drafted the strategic plan. And right now we're at the point where we're receiving feedbacks from the boards and committees such as yourselves, and we'll be bringing this to the Planning Commission in February for the final adoption of the strategic plan. Real quick, wanted to give you an overview of the all staff survey highlights, so the main themes that we heard from our staff. Land use and transportation continues to be a strong theme, something that staff would like to see reflected in the strategic plan. Also would like us to be trends oriented and making sure that we're continuing our strong leadership. Wherever feasible, focusing on implementation as well as our long-term focus with our long-range planning, making sure that we are change agents for the community and as always, staying public driven for what's good for the community as well. During the board retreat, our surveys and interviews, we heard similar to the staff survey, the land use and transportation, again, a very key theme for the board. Regionalism also came up, as well as transportation infrastructure, safety, and linkages. Other topics such as affordable housing and resiliency were important to the board members. And finally, looking at our already strong partnerships and community engagement and seeing how we can build on those. This slide shows you the overview of the draft strategic plan. We've organized it into 4 pillars with main goals underneath that. Each of those has strategies that I'll be going over the next few slides. Our first here is integrated and connected communities. Our second is partnerships and community engagement. Our third is resilient natural and built environment. And our fourth is technology and operational enhancements. Did want to note that the numbering on these pillars doesn't indicate any kind of implementation order or priority. It's just simply for organizational purposes. Our first pillar is integrated and connected communities, and the goal here is to connect mobility and land use. Our strategies speak to looking at population growth and infrastructure needs through various approaches, including looking at proactive planning opportunities and pilot projects, as well as continuing to refine our policies that encourage transportation safety and studying transportation improvement funding options. Again, under our first pillar, our second goal here is to encourage housing opportunities and choice. So making sure that we are working with our jurisdictional partners to protect and promote affordable, equitable, and diverse housing. Within our comprehensive plans, refining our bonus structures and incentives. And finally, also making sure that we're talking to the community and developers to really understand housing related wants and needs. Our second pillar is partnerships and community engagement. And our first goal here is to ensure seamless regional to local connections and partnerships. And our strategies really speak to projects that cross jurisdictional boundaries, including regional transportation and environmental initiatives, as well as looking into grants for these projects, such as state and federal grant opportunities. Our second goal under this pillar is to improve public education and engagement. That includes strategies such as making sure that we're involving communities throughout the entire planning process throughout all stages, also educating the public through innovative and cost-effective methods. Our third and final goal for this pillar is to strengthen existing and create new public-private partnerships. So really enhancing our already existing and strong interagency relationships while also developing new partnerships with additional organizations, maybe organizations that we haven't spoken to before. And with those organizations and those partnerships, making sure that we have a continuous discussion so that those partners are aware of our mandated items, the things that we have to do, as well as the things that we want to do, such as the items from the strategic plan. Our third pillar is resilient natural and built environment. Our first goal is to strengthen resiliency policies and planning projects. So working on our resiliency policies and tools, while also specifically looking at development within the coastal high hazard area, and also making sure that our projects reflect sustainable, livable, and healthy communities. So for example, with that, we have our ongoing TPO air quality monitoring project. So making sure that projects like that continue to move forward, or as similar projects come online, that we support those. Again, under our third pillar, our second goal is to enhance connections between the natural and built infrastructure. So incorporating fiscal, economic, and infrastructure policies into our comprehensive plans as well as looking at connections between the natural and built environment through our policies. So for example, within our comprehensive plans, we have the One Water section. We've added green infrastructure policies. So that would be an example of this strategy. And then finally, looking at socio-demographics and environmental factors, as well as neighborhood conditions and trends throughout all projects. A good example of this would be our community plan updates for Valrico and Palm River. So making sure that we're really honing in on the community that we're working in. Our fourth and final pillar is our technology and operational enhancements pillar. So this is very much an internal pillar. Our goal here is to manage and enhance administrative and financial processes. So making sure that we're empowering our staff and refining our staff best practices. And as many of you know, we've had a number of high profile retirements. So making sure that we're really planning for succession planning and we have new staff ready in place to take on those roles. And then finally, leveraging emerging technologies. You know, we've all heard about ChatGPT and more advanced GIS. So making sure that we're taking advantage of those technologies for our own applications, data, and documents. Our next steps, tonight I will be at the CAC with the same presentation and hoping to answer any questions and gather any feedback. My supervisor, Melissa Dickens, will be at the TPO board this Wednesday to share this very similar presentation to this on the same topics. We'll also be in front of the January 22nd River Board. And once we get all of the feedback and questions, we will be working on updates to the draft strategic plan. After that, we'll be bringing this in front of the Planning Commission on February 12th for adoption. So I know I gave you guys a lot of information in a short period of time. So this is my contact information. I'm also very clearly in the office if you want to come by my desk if you have any questions afterwards. But this is my phone number and email. If you think about it, if you take a look at the draft and you have any questions at a later date, please feel free to contact me. And with that, that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions and take any feedback that you may have. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Katrina. Do we have any questions? Yes, Marcella.
Yes, so this is Marcela with the Health Department. One of the pillars that you mentioned was regarding community engagement. Would you be able to give us more information about how do we get the general public involved, especially those who English is not their first language? How can they participate?
Yes, so we have a few strategies related to community engagement. We tried to keep the strategic plan itself very broad, but we are working to make sure that we're engaging with communities that English may not be their first language or their primary language. Some examples I can give you that are outside of the strategic plan. I know we just purchased buttons that say I'm a Spanish speaker. So we have those at our community meetings so that folks know where to go to speak to Spanish speakers. I also know that in the cases of the community plan updates, we've had a lot of translated materials. I know that Jay could probably speak better to this than me, but there are definitely translations available on our documents that we bring to these public meetings, as well as the translators from our staff that are available. So what we're looking at in terms of the strategic plan, again, is a bit more broad. We have goal 2.2 that's available in your packet, improve public education and engagement. So making sure that we're bringing folks in at all stages with a focus on early involvement. And then our second strategy there is making sure that we have innovative and cost-effective methods. So I think that what you're speaking to would really be addressed under that second strategy. So that's 2.2.2. And that's something that we'll be working with staff on making sure that on the implementation process once this is adopted.
Thank you.
Do we have any other comment? Doesn't seem so. I just for my own comment, obviously the agency I represented, I'm certainly endorsing your pillar 3. You know, we're on the front lines with seeing the impacts of all the build out that's happening to the environment, and there needs to be a balance between the construction and the natural environment. Things are changing urbanly in that regard. Things are changing naturally. So I think it's something that needs to continue to be focused on. So I'm glad to see you're recognizing that as one of your pillars.
Thank you.
Any other comments? With that, I would say thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right, I think that concludes the scheduled agenda. Do we have any old or new business? Does not appear so. I'd be heard no else. I believe we would shall adjourn. Thank you.
Did anyone else need it?
Let's go ahead. So I'm taking that to the TAC.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.